All right, so welcome back to another episode of the ShadowKast. Today I'm very hyped to be joined by Galzo, who just hit 10K on YouTube. He also is the reigning, defending, undisputed Israeli national champion. So I'm excited to have him here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of your channel as well for a long time, and finally we're uniting forces.
Finally, we united forces already, but the ban list dropped. We already had the entire episode recorded. We talked about a lot of interesting things, actually, but mostly it was about the ban list in the last format. So we kind of felt like there's literally zero sense to post it. But you are getting it again. We're going to talk about everything, and I think it should be a very, very good episode. So what's your take on the latest happenings in Yu-Gi-Oh? You know, there was a ban list, Wild Survivors dropped, a new format is forming. How do you feel about it?
I think overall, in one word, optimistic. I'm pretty optimistic. Okay. Things are looking really good, to be honest, coming up to the new format. We're still like mid-national season, which is a bit awkward to see. Like, it's pretty much like ending tomorrow, right? But the current list or the old list at that. But I think overall the ban list was pretty good on a lot of things. It pretty much balanced out the power level of all the decks to sort of like a pretty straight line of, you know, we thought that last format had like 5 competitive decks, but in reality it was mainly still Kastura reigning the format, even with Super Heavy and Pearly. But now it feels like Kastura's power level has been taken down a little bit, and the consistency as well. So like overall as a deck, if it had a power level of 10, now it's probably an 8 or a 7. And then some other decks got some nice boosts, and other decks were not impacted at all. So they pretty much like now are able to match Kastura, which is good. I think it's pretty much going to be like a very balanced format. I'm really, really happy about the ban list overall.
Do you feel like Kastura should have been hit more? A lot of people said that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think overall people were expecting Kastura. There's like a few ways of thinking about this. One is the Konami way, which I think is if there's a reigning archetype and not just like a side archetype or some legacy support, this is their central lore of the game right now. If you're thinking about the Visas decks, you had Tier Elements, now we're going to have this and Vanadium and stuff like that. But Kastura is currently like their flagship for Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes. And it makes sense, similar to what they did with Tier Elements, that they will hit the deck in the unfair non-engine parts, i.e., Unicorn to 2 is just like a consistency hit, and then like Diablos is mainly shutting off the most unfair part of the deck. I can probably guarantee that the next ban list is going to be basically killing Kastura. Just like Unicorn to 1, Field Spell to 1, Fenrir to 1, something like that. But overall, when you're talking about like a central archetype of a central lore in the game that is currently still running, it's going to take 2 ban lists to actually do it. And I think even hitting the power level and the unfair parts is better than what they did to Tier Elements, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Tier was just completely hit. So as much as a lot of people were probably happy about that, I still feel like it didn't deserve such a hit because it just makes the deck kind of just so awkward. Like if you want to play it right now, you're just going to be throwing some names in the graveyard and then like, crossing your fingers and praying you have something to go into in your extra deck. It just kind of sucks. Like one kit would be cool to just have as an option. But like there was a lot of things wrong with Tier.
Yeah.
And Kastura.
But also think about the fact that Tier Element's first hit in the ban list was Curious and Snow.
Yes.
So it's basically what they're doing now. They're hitting Diablos.
It's the same pattern,
Yeah, Snow is horrible in Tier with all the Millers and the Shizu cards and stuff like that. This is probably the most unfair part of the deck. And like the next ban list is basically just a slaughter at this point.
Do you feel like it's a good thing that they brought Snow back and then hit it? Because I don't like my issue is that they just kind of don't care about the health of the game at some points. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to drop a ban list. We're going to make the game healthy. And then at one point in time, they're like, we're going to bring Snow back. We're going to push this insane deck. And we just won't give a damn about the health of the game for a couple months. And then we're just going to ban it again and just be like, oh, whatever. I really dislike when they're like pushing stuff that way and just ignoring the fact that a card like Snow was on the ban list for a reason. Like, I don't know. I think really dislike that.
They've reached a point in the game in terms of game design where now they're trying to like put out a fire with a water gun. It feels like
pretty much, yes.
What happened with Snow is the same thing that happens now with Cyberstein, and my bet it's the same thing that's going to happen to Denglong. Maybe there's a reason to believe that Denglong is going to be one of those cards that's just going to make a U-turn out of the ban list and straight back in. I think it's good that they're experimenting with those kind of things. I think Snow wasn't the problematic card in tier limits, but when you have a card that powerful, every graveyard archetype or every graveyard deck is just going to benefit from it, and then the card will need to get banned again. Same thing happened with Cyberstein. You found like a deck full of machines that can search your machines. You have some really broken fusion cards in the game. So yeah, it will just get banned because it's going to get abused. If Denglong is the same as Snow and Cyberstein, just like incredibly powerful and abusable, and now we're in like a pretty much, we're gonna enter into a peak era of synchros. We have the Assault Synchron and we have the Revolution Synchron that are both really like game-breaking cards. So combine that with one of the best synchro cards ever printed, it's bound to happen again, probably.
Again, it feels that way. Yeah, there's just like, oh, we're gonna give Danglong back to the people, and then we're just gonna take it away after they've had some time, after they've spent enough money on all the new cards we print. I don't know, man. I really dislike that. And also, like, I think the main issue with Snow was actually the fact that it was paired with the tier deck, because not every single graveyard center strategy has enough cards in the graveyard to actually abuse Snow to the point where, just like tier could. Like, tier just had a stacked grave. It was literally stupid. Like, a lot of decks actually, or I should say a lot of versions of tier didn't play Snow if they didn't play cards like, I don't know, Dangers or just random stuff that could lie in the graveyard to be banished. So like if you have a deck that's just, can abuse a card to the point where it gets too much, I don't think they should have even brought it back in the first place. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. But like, I think it's so funny because when I started playing, I didn't think Denglong was an issue because I didn't know about like power level. I wasn't aware. I played Denglong in my Dino deck and I was just like super hyped to like play Chi-Wen and stuff like that. And then it got banned and I was like, why though? And now I totally understand it. So
we're going to have to find out. The reason why I'm happy about Denglong being unbanned is that it gives some decks a little bit more power to contend. And if it ends up being broken, it ends up being broken. But I think I much rather have Konami experiment with unbanning cards, because I believe that they don't want to clog up the ban list with like cards forever. I think their philosophy is we're gonna try to unban as much cards as possible because we don't want 200, 300 cards at some point on the ban list. And sometimes it backfires, but most of the time, if you notice like the amount of cards that do get unbanned unlimited, it's mostly safe. And then you have the one card that kind of breaks it and just gets back into the ban list.
Yeah, but I kind of also think that a card like Trident probably shouldn't be on the ban list anymore. And I remember we talked about this on the last podcast that we did that never saw the light of day, unfortunately. But we talked about how, at least I think so, that they have just lazy card design, and I really dislike that. They print cards that pretty much do the same thing as the cards that already exist or are already hit because they were deemed too good. And I despise that. It's like, why print a card like Arise Heart if you have a card like Trident? That's literally the sort of toned down version of it.
Yeah, that's true. And now I think that like Arise Heart to 1, I think it's going to end pretty much there. I don't think that card is going to get banned at any point. Maybe.
No, probably not.
But we'll see. But obviously I think there's a lot of these experiments over time of like, I tried playing this banned card, playing this banned card, and most of the time it's usually fine because the power level of the game is so strong right now compared to what it was. I think that Konami are, on one hand, trying to balance out things and try to experiment with releasing cards from the ban list, and usually it works. But on the other hand, they're obviously scared because they don't want that to happen. I mean, they don't want to unban a card and just to ban it back again. But again, if we're talking about a card like Trident, yeah, I think Trident could definitely go back. But it takes some thought to think about it, like, how can people abuse it, and people are going to find a way if they can.
Oh, for sure. 100%. And they kind of need to like just save their ass, because they push themselves into a corner. They work themselves into a shoot. They're like, what do we do now? We're literally printing insane decks, insane cards. And literally yesterday, I was talking to you before we started recording that we had nationals. So for everyone that doesn't know yet, we had nationals yesterday in Slovenia under the last ban list. And my issue was I played. After I realized I couldn't top anymore, I just dropped and I went to play Edison format in a side event. And I enjoyed so much. I cannot even describe to you. We literally, me and my one other friend dropped, and we're like, the couple rounds we had to play in the main event were the worst part of the day. And then we literally sat outside on a bench with like 16 people. We just played the hell out of Edison format. We laughed, we cheered, we just had the best time. And it really sucks when you compare a format that feels so good as Edison format does. Everything feels like there's no unfairness. There is literally just skill, and there is deck building. And then you go to the main event hall, you sit there and you look at decks like, I don't know, MethMech and like the Branded Lock or whatever. Stuff is just much more unfair. And I get that they address this on the ban list. So maybe that's not such a good point, because yesterday was still the last format. However, I still feel like there is a lot of work to be done in balancing the game.
It's still going to continue happening, but I think what you said about Edison, the fact that it's like a skillful deck building format, I think you can actually compare it to Tirishizu. I think Tirishizu is probably going to be a really good legacy format in the future. I agree. Obviously, it's like a tier 0 format, but a lot of tier 0 formats are actually favorable because they are not unfair, because they're not, I mean, Necros probably is a little bit different than that, but, Zodiac mirrors and tier limited Shizu mirrors, I think those are really, really fun and wholesome and don't revolve around anything that is unfair. And today, it feels like, I just commented this on one of my comments on my latest video. Somebody told me that, somebody wrote that I shouldn't incentivize people to play the gimmick Puppet Lock, but if you just put a mirror in front of the format, the current format and the new one, it just seems like every deck's main goal is to prevent you from playing the game entirely, not just like outplay the opponent or out deck build the opponent. Just like straight up, don't play the game, and I win. And it's an unfortunate point in the game at the moment, and hopefully like with the right balancing, and like Diablosis is banned, Cyberstein is banned, those are really good. Expulsion is banned, those are great hits. Those are the hits that go in the direction that I personally like.
I agree 100%. We actually talked about this with my husband yesterday. He made a good point how essentially when you have a tier 0 format, everybody has the same tools. So in a format like right now, where you have like 20 different decks and they all do kind of degenerate things to a point, that just sucks. Because in a tier 0 format, maybe some people don't have fun, and some of the casuals are kind of like cringing looking at the format. But like everybody has the same toolbox, and then it's up to you what you do with it. And I think that is much, much better than what we are caught up in right now. Although there are steps being taken, in the right direction still.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a back and forth. Every now and again, there's going to be an unfair format or an unfair deck. Hopefully they tone it down, because it seems like Duelist Nexus is not as powerful of a set, besides maybe Revolution Synchron, I think. I'm not 100% like, I don't remember every card in the set, but overall, there doesn't seem to be anything that stands out as like super unfair. And hopefully they understand it. they clear some of the bad actors in the game, and then they can continue forward with like good card design of like, if you look at last national format where you had Branded and Sword Soul, those were fair decks, just like straight up fair decks that don't do anything unfair. Maybe Protoss at some point was a little bit unfair, but overall the base of the deck is like is fine. And I hope they're gonna keep going in that direction. Like maybe the next Visas archetype is as good as Manadome, which is not good.
We'll see. Do you think do you think Manadium is better than Super Heavy Samurai in the next format? Because they were kind of doing the same thing. And I can't really decide. That's why I'm asking.
From my limited experience playing Manadium and playing versus Manadium, I think it's a bit weaker, just because it has a bigger engine and it relies on certain things to push forward the combo. One of my friends, just like, I couldn't play him because I had to go here, which was amazing. But he plays Manadium with Denglong now, so I really want to see how that works out.
Ooh,
but I'm sure that Manadium might be a little bit better with like the synchro support that's coming out. But on the other hand, I think it's a pretty fragile deck overall.
Yes,
it really doesn't do anything unfair. And honestly, the engine is not something that other decks don't have. It's just like a spam engine on the board with tuners. It doesn't have good boss monsters, like maybe Vicious Astrolaud, but it's not really that amazing. And it's just one of those decks that just like spam cards and ends on Appaloosa and one more interruption and maybe like an Omni Negate. And like, you know, those are fine. You can have that in Tri Brigade as well. And like, you know, nobody plays that.
True.
I think that's pretty much the deck. Like the deck is just like a spam deck, and unfortunately, Super Heavy Samurai, as a much smaller engine within a deck, does a little bit more. I think because the cards are just like a little bit better, and you combine Pendulum with that, so that allows you to like extend your plays a little bit further. And Manadium is like kind of lackluster, but I would be happy to be wrong on this one in the future.
I agree. My issue with it was literally the same. It feels like if you want to be protected, you need to go for Baron. When you go for Baron, you can literally just pass. It's like it doesn't do enough. It just feels like a very glass ceiling type of deck, and I don't not glass ceiling, glass cannon type of deck or whatever the expression is.
Ban Baron.
Yeah, like. We talked about this the last time as well, and I actually wanted to segue into this because I really wanted to include your takes on cards like Access Code and stuff like that in this podcast because you got a ton of, shit for it. So I really want to talk about this again. So for anyone that doesn't know, God had he made a post that received a ton of backlash from people, but like maybe you could explain it better since it's your post.
Yeah, I think basically it started out with like a picture of Access Code Talker and just the word bannable period, and I just tweeted that tweet, and like a lot of it got a lot of comments, retweets, and like, you know, it had some backlash, but then some people were like, hey, yeah, you need to let some decks have like really strong utilities and blah, blah, blah. And it's generic and blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, a lot of people were like, hey, now that you're saying it, I hate wasting 2 interruptions just to get OTK'd by Access Code Talker. And that is my personal opinion. I know a lot of my friends in my testing group were like, at first, they were like, Access Code doesn't need to get banned. Think about some games that you lost to Access Code, and you might change your mind as well.
See, the funny thing is that I don't agree with you, as you know. And for example, yesterday, when we talked about it the last time, you made a point how MathMech, for example, I was talking about how MathMech has to be hit before Circular got limited because we literally know the Banlist dropped, as everybody knows, in the middle of our podcast. So I was talking about how MathMech should probably be hit, and you were like, but what does MathMech end on? It's Access Code. And literally yesterday, while we were still playing under the last list, you know, what happened to me was literally I got hand trapped twice and he had like 2 extenders and then he went for Access Code. I couldn't do anything because he forced out my stuff with Diameter because, of course, you know, there's a negate as well. But I still don't think that even if all of this happens, access code should be hit. I think decks that enable such stuff should be hit because access code has to be this. It feels to me sort of like Boral Sword felt a couple years ago. You kind of have to have this monster that's able to achieve OTKs because like it can be negated on resolution, so that's something to take into consideration. And like not every single deck can actually benefit off of it to the point where they pop your entire board. Only decks that have a ton of attributes in the extra deck. And if you hit those decks, then it's much harder to achieve stuff like the access code OTK. And also I made a point the last time we talked about how maybe you could just like ban Update Jammer because literally that's the stuff that makes it unhealthy. If you just have a monster that's at the best it can get to like 5300 realistically, and then you still need to have quite a strong monster to be able to actually achieve an OTK. And if you already wasted everything to go into access code, there's not a lot of stuff that you also have on top of it to like put a couple monsters on board to OTK. I don't know.
How many times have you faced a board of Baron and access code after you've played a few interruptions, they got baited out, and then just boof?
Yeah, Baron, I mean, probably a lot of times. However, I still think that Baron is much more likely to be banned and should be banned than access code.
Even
I don't
Nibiru,
like to...
Like a board of Nibiru and access code. That happened to me so many times. Just like 8300
okay,
damage.
Nibiru is one of those monsters that's able to do it, yes.
Yeah.
But like at that point, it's almost as if you're playing Boral Sword in your extra. You know, it's still 6k. Boral Sword does more damage, actually. So like, I don't know. I think
my personal problem with access code is that I don't think there should be a monster in the game that is this easy and consistent to bring out.
Okay.
That should allow, like, the sole purpose of the card is to allow you to OTK your opponent from 8,000 to 0. And a lot of times, regardless of Update Jammer, a lot of decks can just like even like the Mathmech Xyz plus an access code is sometimes enough damage if they manage to burn you for a little bit. But I think that access code and Baron are two boss monsters. Maybe we can talk about Baron separately because I feel like you might have a different opinion there. I think that if you're talking about specifically access code, I don't see a reason why a card that is generic and has a few like limitations on your opponent, like you can't negate the attack gain, for example. You can't respond on summon. So for example, if my opponent's only tool is access code Talker and I have a Quem on the board with Albus in the graveyard, it's not going to work because he locks activation when it's summoned because he needs to activate the effect. True. I think there's absolutely no reason why every deck that wants to play it and can spam out a few monsters because it's pretty easy to bring out should have an OTK tool that also clears the board, because even though you can negate it on resolution, since a lot of decks can link climb pretty easily, they just bait out the 1 or 2 interruptions that you have and they just swing for game. And I personally think it's manageable, and I don't think Mathmech was necessarily good because of Access Code Talker, but it's just a card that I feel like is very cheap in design and I just don't like it, and I think it should be banned.
Fair. That's fair. I respect your opinion 100%, and you have a lot of stuff backing that. But like my thoughts on Baron, for example, like I think this card is actually kind of unhealthy, you could say. You know, you could describe it that way because it does way too much. Like, explain to me, why does Baron have to negate and pop and also be able to bring something back in the standby phase just cause? It's kind of like, why? I think the restriction of it only being able to do it once while face up, that's cool. I like this. You know, there's at least something. But I feel like it's way too abusable. If you look at decks right now, there's probably not a single deck that doesn't play Baron. And it's so weird. Like every single deck can play it, especially with Axel Synchron. And that's another card where they print a card that's just absurdly busted. And that's why I also really like the Gamma hit to one. Because you can't go for, you know, Axel Synchron as easily anymore to go into Baron if you go Gamma on your turn. So this I really like. I think this was a good thing on their part.
Gamma was an amazing hit. The best hit on the ban list for sure.
Probably was. Like, maybe it's gonna suck at some point. You're gonna be like, damn, I wish I could put Gamma in my deck and like have it. But looking at it in general, I think it's really cool. And I cannot wait to like go up against a random dragon player and just feel very happy when I get to Ash a Chaos space.
For sure.
It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna feel so good.
Yeah. Leave it down in the comments, guys, if you think Baron or Access Code should be banned. I think the Baron is... In this economy, too easy to bring out, provides too much value, and even though not Access Code nor Baron are ever going to get banned, in my opinion, I think they both belong in the trash. But unfortunately, like Baron is too easy to bring out, like a lot easier than Access Code. They designed all the hand traps to be level 3 tuners, which is absurd. It's cool, but absurd. Yeah, again, it feels kind of cheap because it's literally cheap in terms of card economy. You don't waste a lot of cards, and you get a negate on your turn, so you can combo on your turn with no interruptions. That's absurd.
It kind of is. Like, sometimes I ask myself how we were able to survive through a format where there was also Hulky Fibrax and the Red Rose Dragon and stuff. It's really like, how did this even happen? Like, how were we able to do it? It was absurd, actually. And I was a huge Prankits fan, for example, but even I can say that it was very unhealthy to be able to put up Rite of Aramesir and have protection, as well as like a chain block and all of that. Like, I don't know, man. We were in some dark points a lot of times in the last couple of years.
I miss those days.
Yeah?
Hulk was really fun. I mean, the whole period was just like fun cards. The Red Rose stuff, maybe not Scythe, but like Hulky Fibrax and Chaos Ruler, those cards are fun to play. Even Verte.
Like, I liked Chaos Ruler and Hulky Fibrax in the Dragon deck, which again, that's very biased because I was a huge fan of that deck. But overall, just the sheer ability of someone being able to bait out your stuff and then just normal a tuner and go for fiber, this is literally the stuff of my nightmares. Like, this just shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah. It just happens today when they go up to Baron. That's it.
Literally, it's very reminiscent of that. And again, we're at the point in the discussion of talking about lazy card design. They literally print stuff that's easy to go into and that's very abusable, but they just kind of put a different name on it and just call it a day and maybe make it a synchro, not a link, and then it's whatever. Like, I don't know.
Definitely.
Another thing that was very funny to a lot of people on the ban list was the Runic Fountain Tattoo. So this one is literally like, it's a huge meme. It's just like, why even do it? And then I read somewhere on Twitter, someone pointed out like, it's probably just foreshadowing for them hitting Runic, literally just burning them to a crisp in the fall ban list. So this might happen.
That's true. I think that a lot of times you see Konami sort of like forcing people to play the correct ratios of cards. It was similar when I think it was Shooting Riser Dragon that got limited, and I think Hulky Fiber got limited as well. Before before it was really popular playing it at 2, it got limited. And then I think it prevents. It's obviously a non-hit. They didn't hit Runic at all. I think Runic Tip is a card that either should be at 1 or banned entirely. I think Runic Tip is just absurd of a card. I think Runic Fountain is fine. I mean, it's part of it's like the base of what runs Runic, obviously. And I don't think it would be correct to even ban Runic Fountain ever. But I think right now what they're trying to do, I think also the foreshadowing part, I think it's probably right that Runic, I think after this format, and we're probably going to talk about that later, Runic is going to stand out as probably the best deck in the upcoming format. The deck is pretty much untouched, with Sprite losing only one starter out of the 3. And it's basically Konami saying, okay, you need to be playing 2 because we feel like 2 is manageable. And honestly, people would have played 3 if the card was in 3 in certain builds. They would have played 3. And then you would have said, how is this card in 3? Right?
But so actually, like if they were playing it in builds that are like Stun Runic, like literally just fuck those people. If you're playing Stun Runic, like can you just can you just go somewhere, like stand in a corner and like turn away and just don't interact? It's like shame on you. But like for real, they're actually doing stuff like playing Amano Iwato and then cards like, I don't know if it's Prohibition or another card that does it, but they like prevent Amano's effect from returning, but the continuous effect still applies. Like it just tilts me. It tilts me. But like, you mentioned the next format, and I would love to talk about that. I think Runic is going to be insane. It's going to be really, really strong. It's going to be strong in Sprite. Overall, Sprite is going to be busted. So yeah, what's your take on the next format, on everything that's coming?
Yeah, I've been testing a lot for the next format. I think my view hasn't really changed since probably my tier list video, which basically put Kastura as the best deck with Runic or Runic Sprite or some variation of Runic. It could also be for higher, but we'll have to see. Labyrinth, Branded, and then I'm not sure if I'm missing another deck, but I think those are probably like the top 4.
I don't think you are.
It might have changed because I played a lot of Kastura, and it feels like suddenly it's like a huge nerf to Kastura, even though no engine cards were hit basically except for like one unicorn, right? The Arise Heart to 1 makes it so that the grind game and like making a Rise Heart every turn is a lot harder for the deck, and they need to pass turn with a Rise Heart on the board. And if you out it once, it becomes a little bit more complicated it becomes more of a resource grind for Kastura to bring it back to the field. But I do think that Labyrinth, Branded, Kastura, and Runic Sprite variant, maybe we're going to see some Vanquished Soul, hopefully. I think this deck is super based. Are going to be like the top contenders, but it's kind of hard to tell. I think that because the format kind of took a step back and Runic and Sprite were basically untouched, it means that we kind of go back to Runic Sprite being the best deck because it was the best deck before Kastura arrived into the format. Drawing so many cards is absurd. Strike is an absurd engine. It's really, really good. And I think it's also a relatively fair deck to play against. It's a deck that plays like full gas. It has a lot of weaknesses going second. And it's I would be happy for Runic Sprite to be the best deck of the format for sure.
No, I think that's I agree, because I think it's an issue when there's a format where you kind of have to dedicate your a lot of time to very good deck building in terms of I have to play a lot of hand traps just because I have to. I think that's an issue. I think it's cool when there's a format when deck building is really important in terms of tech cards you play or like just ratios or ways you build your deck or whatever. But when you literally have to sit down and be like, okay, how do I put in 15 hand traps? I have to make room. I think that's an issue, and that's also why Runic wasn't doing as well. And I think it's very bad when an entire engine is hindered because of the format and how it shifted. So I really like that the ban list addressed that, and you can play Runic again where you don't have to play as many hand traps to be able to counter the meta. So I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah. I agree. I think Konami did a really huge favor to all Runic players, leaving their investments barely, like basically untouched, and also getting rid of Super Heavy Samurai, rest in peace, which we talked about a lot in the previous podcast. But of course, the deck is non-existent basically now that they've banned Scarecrow, and it created such a format shift where everybody were like really scared of not playing hand traps, because if you don't play any hand traps, you don't stand a chance of breaking a board at all. Yes. And it was a combination of Kastura and Super Heavy Samurai ruling the format, which just
and that's problematic.
Made the deck building super awkward.
Yes.
And now I think it's going to go back to being a little bit of a board breaker format with some power hand traps. Ash and Bell probably going to be still very good. And then you have... Also wanted to talk about Lightning Storm to 2, which is super interesting, in my opinion, which kind of ties into that. It kind of, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, it suddenly made me want to play Lightning Storm again. It was like, I have 2 spots in my side deck. Lightning Storm is at 2. Yeah, probably should shove in some Lightning Storm over there.
No, I think it's a very good hit. I agree with that hit 100%.
Really? With Lightning Storm?
Yes, I do, because it was like, it feels like a card that's too good at 3 because you just completely annihilate a deck when you use it, whereas also you can like totally clog on it and it's just gonna be absurdly bad in some instances. So it just felt like a very weird card, but now that it's a 2, it just feels like it's the perfect ratio, because a lot of times in recent years, we saw the decline of trap decks because there was just too much going against it. Like there was Red Reboot, which, Red Reboot, I have some different opinions on that, but that's whatever. Yeah. It's banned now, so we don't need to care about that. But there was a lot of stuff just completely annihilating trap decks. And I think that's an issue because it's an actual, like, it's a mechanic. Like you kind of need to, or however you want to put it, it's a way of playing and you can't just stomp on trap decks. So I think it's cool that they brought it to 2 just so trap decks can shine again. I think we've seen a resurgence of decks. There's Labyrinth, there's Trap Tricks, even Outlich is seeing some tops, even though there are Floodgates, and I would love to hear your take on that as well. If you feel like it's healthy that Floodgates are like pushing some trap decks over the edge, but I feel like it's a good thing. I think the hit to 2 is good.
I think Lightning Storm to 2 is fine. I'm not really sure that it's going to do a whole lot. The only thing that it did for me is like seriously made me want to consider playing Lightning Storm, basically. But I think that one thing regarding like Floodgates and trap decks in general, I think Red Reboot was a super unfair card to trap decks. Like if traps are a third of the cards in general, like in terms of like representation, and some decks revolve around that, it's basically a quick, like a trap card that you can activate from your hand, or a monster effect that you can activate from your hand that says your opponent cannot activate monster effects for the rest of the turn, right? Because their deck relies on traps to play. It's not a healthy card. I think that card is good and banned. I think trap decks are reliant on Floodgates to win a lot of the times, but I don't think it's different than, I don't know, monster decks, right? Like any other decks. When you have Kastira Rizard, which is a monster Floodgate, when you have like, cards like Dark Law and every other monster Floodgate that is in the game, it doesn't have to be like locking your opponent, it just needs to be a Floodgate. So I think trap decks use their tools, and there's just a lot of really, really good Floodgate trap cards. This is why they use them to play, because, Labyrinth can just put up a skill drain and it's fine. They have big monsters that don't activate the effects on the field. They can also bounce cards, so they actually resolve. So I think overall it's fine. I think the Lightning Storm to 2, and also the Sprite Starter to 2, Unicorn to 2. We saw a lot of that in the last ban list.
Yes.
It looks like a change in ban list philosophy or ban list approach by Konami. We saw that a few years ago, but then it kind of stops, and now it's kind of coming back up again. People were like, yeah, semi-limit Runic Fountain, semi-limit this and this, but then everybody were just like dismissing it because they said like Konami in the TCG doesn't do these things. Usually semi-limited cards, and they have been for a few years, are just cards that were limited and now are back at 2 before they go to 3. It was just like a one ban list stop for most cards. But now,
low-key is just malicious.
it was just malicious, and then it was like Desires for a while. Now they're actively taking an approach of limiting cards that are really strong for consistency purposes. And I think that's a very good change in approach, because I much rather have semi-limited cards than just not having limited cards at all. Because if they wouldn't have taken this approach, and if they would have continued their approach from the last few ban lists, like years I'm talking about, then Lightning Storm wouldn't have gone to 1, because it didn't deserve to go to 1, right? It wouldn't have gone to 1, because if the only option is just like from 3 to 1, then they wouldn't have done it. But I think this is a really, really good direction, and this is why, again, I think the ban list was such a good ban list because of that philosophy change as well.
That's a very good point, and I think overall it kind of surprised me how they how much the ban list was not what we expected. We were kind of thinking about how the hits aren't gonna matter; they might bring some stuff back. But this entire change in philosophy, like you said, it's very interesting, and it came as a bit of a surprise. But still, I really like I would have liked to have more communication on their part. That was a lot of stuff we talked about in recent weeks. Pretty much if you went on Twitter, that's the only thing you saw. It was like, they're not talking to us, we don't know what's happening. And the last ban list they did, they made a post about the changes and the reasonings behind that. And I don't know, at least, or I haven't seen it, if they made a post now for this ban list. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything. And I think there's a lot of issues there as well. If they're changing, and if they're changing their philosophy and their way of thinking, they might actually start to work on fixing a relationship with their player base as well.
Yeah, hopefully. I think it's completely not up for debate that Konami needs to have set dates or ranges of dates of when a ban list is dropped. I think tournament schedules are known a long time in advance, maybe even like a year. They know when tournaments happen. They know when sets are released, and they have comparison from the OCG to just like, compare stuff and take reference of what cards actually do. There's no reason why we wouldn't have a date or like a range on the website that tells us when there's a ban list. There's literally people who purchased Pearly cores, super heavy Samurai cores, and just got shafted on the ban list. And I don't think that's acceptable. I understand that sometimes these things can happen, and it probably wouldn't have prevented people from picking up Pearly cores, right? But it just doesn't make sense to leave it up in the air. We know there's going to be like 3 ban lists a year or something like that. There's no reason to have zero commitment from Konami's side on this.
No, I think the issue is that they don't. What they could have done is they could have just said this and this event is going to be played under this and this ban list. I would be completely content with that. And I also really dislike the fact that I suspected this was going to happen, and it did. They left the big nationals in Europe to be played under the new ban list. So French nationals, German nationals, and then I think it's also Denmark or something. Like 3 big nationals are going to be played under the new list, and it just feels like they kind of just care for those events because the majority of players is going to go there, whereas they're like, oh, we don't really give a damn about small nationals, like I don't know, the ones we had here in Slovenia. It just sucks. It's like they drop a ban list and they don't even bother thinking about which events are going to take place. Like last year especially, they dropped a ban list, we had nationals in 1 week. So a lot of people, like myself included, we were left deckless for the event. It was literally like, what do I do now? And I think if they just said like, this event is going to be under this list, sure. A lot of people were also very nervous about going to YCS Philly because they didn't know if a ban list is going to be in effect yet. And also the fact that they dropped it in the middle of Philly, like what's up with that? That's so
I think that was, in my opinion, that's unacceptable. I think that is... I made a lot of fun about it already, so I'm kind of like laughed out because it's not funny to me that something like this would happen. I was talking like we were finishing the podcast, and I got off the podcast, made my reaction video, blah blah blah, went on Discord, talked with my friends, and then I realized like YCS Philly is going on like right now.
Yes.
And I told my friends, like, imagine the mental state people have to be in, besides like people screaming in the venue and like, the commotion that something like this creates. What is the reason to do something like this? There's no good reason why you wouldn't, like, you already pushed us for like months without an answer. Why just not wait till Monday or make it on Friday before the event? I mean, why would you have to? Because it's pretty much unheard of at this point that it's on a Saturday, right?
It's very
I don't know
weird.
Historically, but I think usually it doesn't go out on a Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know either, but yeah.
I think that's a horrible decision out of whoever decided to make that decision. I'm really hoping it's like an oversight because it just doesn't make sense to me. there's no way.
It takes away a lot from content creators. It's just the way it is. Like, people do reactions, and that's just the reality of things. And they're literally left without content, without a way of reacting. It takes away a lot of, focus you have if you're playing like over there. Did you see any videos? I saw a video of like, I think it was Peru or something, where there was an event and people just went crazy. So it's like you're playing at an event, and people are also posting on Twitter how other players were coming up to them, like really like tugging their sleeves, going like, a Banlist is out and you're like in the middle of a game, like, just go away. Just don't talk to me. Why not even
the content creators, like, as a content creators, I don't think Konami should care about that specifically, but I think
they don't need to, but it will be cool.
The players, out of respect to the players who are playing in the event, imagine what this does to players. Like, what does this create in a venue? And if Konami had any sense of community and the people who pay money for their product, they wouldn't have released it in such bad timing. I think out of respect for the players who came, flown from whichever state or country to participate in the event, took time and money to build the deck and prepare, and then pretty much take a big shit on their faces and just dump a ban list mid-tournament. And also, it kind of invalidates or kind of hinders the win out of the event as well. Like, the person winning the event, it's no longer relevant.
That's what I wanted to say matter. As well. Yeah.
Their deck profile, nobody cares about that anymore. And I think that's super unfortunate. Like, nothing would have happened if you just waited until Monday to release the ban list like you usually do. There is no reason. Like, no one, I hope, right, in my dreams, somebody from Konami actually says, okay, this is why we did it on a Saturday, because we had Wild Survivors and blah, blah, blah. But there's no way someone could come up with a good reason other than we're just weird and sadistic. I don't know. It
makes it sadistic. It really makes zero sense because they put it in effect on tomorrow, which is the 5th. On the 5th. So they could have dropped it. Literally, they could have dropped it this Friday. They could have dropped it on the 2nd even. They could have waited.
Tomorrow is a Monday. They could have done it on a Monday and just have it a week
as well.
To prepare. There's no nationals on Monday. So people will essentially have almost 2 weeks to prepare. There's just no reason. I think it was in extremely poor taste, in my opinion.
It's very weird. Very, very weird. But to talk about a bit more lighthearted topics, I want to also get into Wild Survivors. You talked a little bit about Vanquish Soul. I think the deck has a lot of potential. But I feel like, man, I said we're going to talk about lighthearted stuff, but now I'm going to get into it again. And so, yes, I'm going to get into it again. Why is the deck so expensive? And it's like, I mean, I get why. Like, I get it. It's a side set, all of that. But why even do it? It's a deck build pack. Like, you want people to build their decks, not spend half of their salary on the deck. And also the thing I also dislike about it is a lot of times they will print support for a deck coming out of a side set, and then the deck is going to be even more expensive, and then the support might even be expensive unless it's like in a main set. But how is it cool that, for example, Labyrinth was very expensive and then they released the Big Welcome Labyrinth, which is not expensive at all, but still the core went up because it's from a side set. And the same thing is going to happen to Vanquish. So it seems like such a cool deck, and I just I get tilted.
I think that Vanquish Soul has deck building packs for anybody who's listening or watching and doesn't know. Those are the packs where the commons are rares and you have collector's rares basically in the set. So you have rares, super rares, ultra rares, and collectors. You don't have any secret rares.
They release like the 3 archetypes.
So the rarities in the set, the high rarity is ultra rare, basically. So those are the chase ones, and I think you have 3 or 4 in a booster box, right? So deck building
2
sets
or 3,
2 or 3?
Yeah, I think someone said maybe 3. It was a fact that I didn't know, but someone said 2. Someone said they pulled 2 out of a box, which is kind of wild.
That could happen, but I think the average is like 3 if you don't have any errors, I think. You could do like 3 in a collector, but that's besides the point. Deck building sets have usually 3 archetypes, and maybe some of them get support. So think about sets where you had like, for example, Grand Creator is probably the best deck building sets of all time. It had Adventure, it had Punk, and it had Exo Sisters, for example.
Yes.
Again, you had like Tactical Masters, which had Valence, Runic, and Labyrinth, right?
Yes.
It's always the same thing. And it's also always where 2 archetypes get 3 ultras, and one, usually the best one, the better one out of the 3, gets a 4th ultra. Vanquished Soul got 7 ultras.
Yeah, it's 8 ultras also per box.
It's 8?
Yeah. 8 ultras per box, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't it? 8 or 10 ultras per box.
I think it's... No, they
not box, set. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's... is it 10? Yeah, it's 10 overall in the set. And they got...
Yeah, okay.
They got 7 out of the 10 that are in Wild Survivors in general. I went back and I looked, and there hasn't been any precedent of that happening. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but in the past 2 years, it hasn't happened. And again, it's another decision where I'm like, why? So Wild Survivors is a bit different than other deck building sets because usually the archetypes are balanced, but here you had Nouvelle, you had Vanquished Soul, but then you had like Dinosaur Support, which isn't really an archetype on its own. So it kind of didn't even make sense to give them, a lot of ultras. They got 1, I think. The spell card is an ultra, the Ground Xeno spell card. And then Nouvelle, which is the Hungry Burger archetype, they got 2. Vanquished Soul got 7.
Yes.
So 7
that
ultra
was the distribution, yeah.
So 7 ultra rares where you pull, where you have a lot of 3-ofs in the archetype, and when you pull 3 ultra rares in a box, equals a very expensive archetype, which right now is around $300 on like any website you would look for, some less, some more, but overall super expensive. I think it could prevent some people from picking it up. The set itself is not that great besides Vanquished Soul. And now if you want to get a box and open it, you might pull more valuable cards, but you're going to have to open more boxes to get, even remotely close to having a playable deck. I think Vanquished Soul is a really cool archetype, which I personally would have wished to play, but I'm not really looking forward to paying like $300 for the core. And again, it's one of those things where Konami seems probably more greedy than they would have wanted. I don't see any harm in, maybe spreading out the ultras a little bit more equally within the set, or just changing the set design a little bit more to fit the usual ratios. But again, it's another thing where people are going to be like, why? And there's not going to be an answer.
But also, like, I'm not sure why they decided to just switch away from all foil sets. I think all foil sets were a very big success. Yeah. Like, we loved Dark Saviors, and there's just a lot of hype behind, like, opening a pack and seeing, like, those. All secrets and like, supers or just whatever. Like, I love it. And right now, if you open a pack and you see, like, a bunch of rares and then there's, like, a super and you're like, wow. That's what I want. No, it's not. Like they could have had an all foil set and put collector's rares in there as well. They could have done it. The player base would be insanely excited. I think.
Well, you have Battles of Legends, which is an all foil set, and it has Starlights.
Yeah.
We also had Magnificent Mavens, which was, I think, I pray to God we get another set like this. This was one of the better products that I've ever opened.
It would be really, really amazing. Yeah.
We have Battles of Legend at the end of the month, which is usually like a few ultras and a secret every pack, which is really fun to open because it's super hype. But deck building sets overall tend to be really trash, and I kind of like the way that they kind of spread out the rarities and made sense out of it. Like now you know which rarities and which set. It's kind of cool. But overall, they tend to be... And one thing I also like about deck building sets is the fact that usually they have a lot of good staples as rares. So you get a box, usually get a playset of every staple that is reprinted as a rare. But overall, I'm really disappointed in the fact that Vanquished Soul got so many ultra rares.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens with it because it's a really cool deck. As we're recording now, Vanquish Soul was in the finals, lost the finals, by the way, against Castura in the Italian National Championship. So we have another Castura win. But the deck is really, really cool. So I think it has some potential.
But also yesterday at our nationals, he got top 8. I was also very hyped. I was very hyped to see
Super
that.
hype.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think he was the only person like 100% certain he was the only person playing it at the event, and he got top 8, which is just amazing. People were going like, I don't know what's up with Vanquish Soul. I've never seen it. Like, how do I play against it? But I really like it in a way, like how it just plays. I think it's such an interesting and so well designed deck, you know, with the attributes and all of that. I really, really like that when they're trying new things with archetypes. I'm a huge fan of that. So that is a good thing about WoW Survivors. You know, we got a very interesting deck out of it, but when it inevitably receives some support, it's going to be even more expensive, which kind of sucks. And another thing I was kind of disappointed with is the fact that Pearly also came out of a deck building pack, got support, which people had to wait about 6 months for. And now when Delicious is hit, they still need to wait a tiny bit more for new support in Duelist Nexus. So they literally spend the majority of the year waiting for a support that's supposedly arriving, you know, at some point in the distant future. So I think that's a big issue. As much as I personally kind of like that they don't see Delicious memory in every single hand, that's besides the point, you know. It's not fair actually to some players.
I feel bad if you're a Pearly player. But get good and play Branded, I guess.
Get good and play Branded. He said it. What's another thing we could be discussing? Like, what's going to be going on in the game? Like, everything is just going to be kind of dying slowly with the summer, you know. We're almost at the end of nationals. We only have the European Championship, then it's an NAWCQ, and I guess
we have Worlds.
Well, of course, yes. But like in terms of like, you know, stuff for the regular people.
The regular people, you guys can tune in and watch those big tournaments. I think it's kind of dying down right now. I posted on Twitter a few days ago, like, anybody's got like tournaments and wagers and stuff, because I'm like, there's not going to be any in-person tournaments for me since I'm not going to Euros.
You're not going to Euros?
I'm not going to be in Euros, unfortunately, because I have a vacation planned that was planned before that. And honestly, like, you know, I love Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'd rather be lying on a sunbed in Greece than being stressed out in Euros.
That's fair. But you did get all expenses paid as the national champion, right?
Yes. So I'm going to convert that to a European YCS of my choosing. So I'll see you guys in Europe someday.
Okay. Dope.
Overall, I think I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how things develop going to Euros. I think French Nationals is going to be really exciting. Seeing all the decks, it's probably going to be next weekend.
French and German
calculation.
I think French might be next weekend, and then German is in two weeks time, I think.
Yeah. So those are going to be super competitive, pretty big nationals, probably the biggest besides the Italian one, which was and the UK one, which is in the old Banlist. Those are going to be really, really interesting to see what people tech out and find to be like really good decks. We also have some, you know, this is a TCG channel, but Master Duel is coming up with like new stuff, like Bestials are coming, so that's good for me. A little bit closer to Cartesia. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Worlds. I'm really excited for Worlds because I only watched Worlds like on VODs on YouTube from like 2019. This is, I think, when the last World Championship was.
Yes.
I think it was like Salad Mirror in the finals or something. So I'm super excited to see like people I know and decks that I know how to play or maybe played myself competing for the Worlds. I think it's going to be super exciting.
Oh, for sure. And I hope, I mean, probably the nationals are going to be streamed. Although today, literally, the Italian nationals got flooded, which, we were talking about it before we started recording. That's horrible. It's like, it's very cool that they still decided to play it out and actually crown a champion. That's amazing. So props to the person with Kashira winning. There's a lot of Kashira wins in this nationals format. There's a couple branded wins as well. Like yours.
3 now.
Wasn't the only one. Yeah, there's like 3 wins, which is kind of dope, That's cool, and I'm amazing, really hyped. I'm hyped to see German nats, to see French nats. It's going to be very, very cool, and also it's going to be a very good precedent for how decks are going to be built, which cards are going to be popular. So yeah, even if, the scene kind of dies down in the summer, you can still lab stuff. You can still try your best and gain a ton of inspiration for these types of events. So, we'll of course be covering it. I'll make sure to do some covers. I'm pretty sure Gazo is going to have some content up when it comes to that as well. And of course, if you're trying to play branded, his channel is the go-to source for that. I think your channel has a ton of amazing information and just quality content. So I'm really excited to have had you here today. And it was really nice to talk to you. I appreciate all your opinions, even if we disagree a lot of times. So yeah, it was really cool to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast talking about like everything. And again, I'm super excited to see how this format and how this European, like continental championship and then worlds plays out. And I'm sure we both will have enough content to keep you guys entertained throughout the summer. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll make sure to have all of Gazo's socials in the description and everywhere. And if you're only listening in, you can also check us out on YouTube, actually see our faces and get to interact with us in the comments. Please let us know your thoughts. And of course, make sure to follow Gazo, check all of his stuff out. And I thank you guys so much for watching or listening, all your support, all of that. And be on the lookout for the next episode. Let me know which guests you would like me to feature. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.